Spring football is fun. That's it, that's the video. For the last 10 years, spring football has gone from minor league afterthought to one of the most entertaining aspects of the football offseason, bridging the gap from the Super Bowl in February to the NFL draft in late April. We've had a handful of spring leagues come and go over the last 5 years, too. There was the AAF in 2019, bringing us such great storylines as Younghoe Koo, the kicker, Johnny Manziel's return to football, and the last chance for Trent Richardson to prove that he can be a big-time running back. But that league failed because it ran out of money. The next year brought the revival of the XFL, spearheaded by definitely a good guy Vince McMahon, who wanted to
give the game of football back to fans.
The league was innovative, letting go of the WWE-esque flair and glitz of its predecessor in favor of trying to carve out a niche for itself in the football space. Where former leagues tried to target areas known for high levels of football fans, the new XFL tried to focus on areas that could use more football. There were areas that featured teams double-dipping in pro markets like Los Angeles, New York, Seattle, and Washington, D.C., but there were also a few new areas that hadn't seen professional teams there before, or at least in a while. Namely, the St. Louis Battlehawks, who played in the old home of the Rams, proved that there was a market for football left in Middle America. It was also home to some of football's greatest comeback stories. Players like Ben DiNucci, P.J. Walker, and Jacour Pearson were able to become the faces of the small league, and for a brief moment, it felt like a minor league might actually work. But that league also failed because it ran out of money, and the pandemic didn't help. It tried a comeback season in 2023 after a failed merger with the CFL, but that season didn't work either because it ran out of money. Then there was also a second iteration of the 80s-born USFL in 2022. Originally torpedoed by and his failed merger with the NFL, the newer iteration of the USFL featured some of its old teams and a lot of players that overlapped with the XFL. It ran for 2 seasons from 2022 to 2023 and featured some more good football players like Jordan Teamu, Scooby Wright, and CJ Marable. But this league also failed because it ran out of money. Eventually, the USFL and the XFL, recognizing the state of minor league football, decided in 2024 that the leagues would merge, taking only a few of the teams from both leagues and creating a new league. The guys spearheading this were unironically Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, his ex-wife Dani Garcia, and Disney. The original alignment of teams used 4 teams from the prior XFL and 4 teams from the prior USFL, split into divisions regarding their previous league and not geography. In the XFL division, there were the Arlington Renegades, San Antonio Brahmas, St. Louis Battlehawks, and DC Defenders. These 4 teams had some of the highest attendance throughout the previous iterations of the XFL, which was important because the average attendance of an XFL game was under 20,000 fans. St. Louis had some of the highest attendance, averaging over 30,000 people per game, less than the average Power 5 football program does for a mid-season game. In the USFL division, there were the Birmingham Stallions, who had been very competitive in the previous season, the Houston Roughnecks, which maintained the assets of the Houston Gamblers while taking the name of the XFL's Roughnecks, the Michigan Panthers, and the Memphis Showboats, oddly enough leaving out perhaps the USFL's greatest brand in the New Jersey Generals. After 1 season, it was apparent that 8 teams might not be enough. But at the same time, the league wasn't exactly making money. Despite the fact that the teams in the league played games in their home stadiums instead of hub stadiums and were all owned by the league itself and not individual owners, something that doomed prior leagues like the original USFL, sponsorships for the league weren't exactly beneficial. Notably, the Army paid the league nearly $10 million in sponsorship money to get special patches placed on team jerseys and commercials played during games, and they didn't even feel like they got their money's worth out of the deal once the season ended. On top of that, there's an ongoing dispute with the players' union in the league right now. But if the league wants to survive, it becomes apparent that individual teams' ticket prices are going to be important. They need to find markets that can support the individual teams with stadiums that can fill at least 25,000 fans, and then find ways to fill at least 20,000 of those seats every week. That won't exactly be happening before the next season, though. Russ Brandon, the current president of the UFL, stated in an early press conference that expansion was already on the table as soon as the league started, with 2025 seen as the target to add 2 teams, and then another 2 teams being eyed for 2027. So it's coming at some point in the next 2 or 3 years. But from where, why, and how? To find that out, I first gathered information about each of the existing UFL football programs, like their location, whether or not a pro team was already in the market, the size of their market, the size of the stadium they were playing in, and their average attendance and how much of the stadium they tended to fill. When you look at the attendance numbers, just how bleak it is starts to become apparent, especially since those numbers were apparently worse than XFL numbers the year before. So in finding new markets, I have to see correlations between data points and attendance success, and try and find markets where those successes are more of a sure thing. To start, I pulled some numbers from a few previous XFL teams we have attendance numbers from, starting with the Seattle Sea Dragons. The Sea Dragons were another fan-favorite team, far-flung up at the Pacific Northwest, isolated from every other XFL team, but it felt like they still managed to pull some pretty big crowds for the XFL standards. Their listed average attendance from their last year in the XFL was 12,310. They played in the home of the Seahawks, Lumen Field, which has an official capacity of over 68,000, but they lower it to closer to 38,000 for MLS and XFL games. Lumen Field is probably their best option other than attempting to share a baseball field with the Mariners because it's also shared by MLS teams. But if we move the Dragons franchise somewhere else, like, say, Tacoma, we're able to change venues while staying in the same medium market. Unfortunately, the best option for venues is the beautiful but not ready for Pro Ball Stadium Bowl, a high school stadium that seats 15,000 spectators. Another option is the Tacoma Dome, which seats 21,000 spectators and is probably our best bet for a semi-pro franchise in the Pacific Northwest. I have the numbers in italics here because it is our best case scenario guess as to how it would work. Tacoma's a little ways away from Seattle after all, and changing cities and venues could have a huge effect on attendance numbers and support. Whether or not it would work is up in the air. Compare that to another former XFL team, the Orlando Guardians, who aren't in an NFL market necessarily, but take claim over the whole state for fans of teams like Jacksonville, Tampa Bay, and Miami. Despite that, they played in Camping World Stadium, a 60,000 capacity venue that they only averaged about 15% capacity in for the 2023 season. A smaller venue like Inter & Co Stadium might be a better fit for UFL football, but there are concerns about overlapping with the MLS season. So the Guardians or Apollos or any other former Orlando team might be in, but that remains to be seen. So now we get into the range of hypothetical teams in places that we haven't seen play host to minor league or semi-pro football on a major level anytime in the last 5 or 10 years. One of my ideas is a return of a squad in Oklahoma, like the Oklahoma Outlaws of the original USFL, that ended up moving to Arizona. This would allow a historical team in a college football-crazed state. Sooners and Pokes love their college football and have to choose between cheering for the Chiefs or the Cowboys. The problem with the Outlaws coming back are kind of the same as they were in their original iteration. There are already 3 teams in the state of Texas, with the Arlington Renegades being situated in northern Texas. Aside from moving the Renegades to Oklahoma City, there are other questions as well. Where would they play? The main target is Oklahoma City, square in between Norman and Stillwater, and the biggest city in the state. The problem is that there aren't necessarily any good stadiums for the Outlaws to play in. The best option in OKC is probably Chickasaw Ballpark in Bricktown, which has the double whammy of being a baseball stadium and being really small. If we use the small end of attendance, Memphis' 6,839 as an estimate for what we could expect from an OKC team, we arrive with 76% capacity filled. But it's still a nightmare of a stadium to play in. The old Outlaws played at Skelly Field in Tulsa, which might be a better spot. While it is further away from the biggest population center in the state and would be the smallest market in the league, it also places it in a convenient midway point of sorts between Memphis, Arlington, and St. Louis. The obvious location here is Skelly Field, the on-campus home of the Tulsa Golden Hurricane football program, at 30,000 capacity. If we use our same lowball estimate, though, we arrive at just 23% capacity filled. The Outlaws aren't a good idea either. The second of these places I'm looking at is based solely on the fact that they might have been the most popular USFL team back in the day and have a lot of familiar faces in their history. The New Jersey Generals. While the original Generals in the 80s played in the old Giants Stadium, the new Generals didn't have a chance to play in front of home crowds due to the new USFL's hub system. This new iteration of the Generals would either also play at MetLife Stadium or, in my opinion the better option, at an MLS stadium nearby, like Sports Illustrated Stadium in Harrison, New Jersey. If we use an average of UFL teams that aren't St. Louis or DC to gauge potential attendance, we arrive at 9,018 potential fans, or 36% attendance, which is actually on the higher side for the XFL. I think a return of the Generals could also be a good idea. But the stadium they played in is one that I think could easily bridge the geographical gap between Detroit and DC and play host to an excellent fan base in a football-starved state. That of Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium in Canton, Ohio, and they already have the perfect franchise to reintroduce to football in the Canton Bulldogs. Like Texas, which is a football-frenzied state that so far has 3 representatives in the UFL, Ohio is a very strong football state. It has two pro teams in the Cincinnati Bengals and Cleveland Browns, both with die-hard, if not tortured, fan bases. There are also a whopping number of 8 FBS football programs in Ohio, 2 of which are Power 4 in Ohio State and Cincinnati. There's clearly enough love for the sport for the state to support a semi-pro football team, and I believe Canton, the birthplace of professional football and within the Cleveland metropolitan area, is the perfect place to put it. Hall of Fame Stadium is a pro-ready stadium that seats approximately 23,000 fans, which is well in line for what we know succeeds in the UFL. Using the same low-ball projection of just over 9,000 fans, we can see that the Bulldogs would probably fill 39% of the stadium for home games. But I really think that they'd be able to pull more, in line with potentially DC or even St. Louis, so if we average every team in the league, we arrive at almost 13,000 fans, which would fill 56% of the stadium. Regardless of a lowball or pie-in-the-sky estimate, I believe that Canton should be an absolute lock for UFL expansion. As for the team itself, the Canton Bulldogs were a professional team that played in what would later become the NFL and folded in 1927. They were a dominant program with 4 undefeated seasons and 5 total championships under players like Jim Thorpe. Their dominance is the whole reason the Hall of Fame is in Canton in the first place. But since they folded in the late 1920s, we have no idea what a 1920s version of the team would look like. Well, I don't, anyway, but my good friend Dalton's ideas definitely would. He's one of the most creative people I know, and in my opinion is one of the most underrated creators in the state. Take it away, Dalton.
My favorite part of speculating about league expansion teams is when it's a revitalization of a program that has such a deep history like the Canton Bulldogs. We already have the skeleton of a legendary franchise, all we have to do is bring it into the 21st century. So that's why before I even started, I went ahead and put together this mood board to get inspiration from the original Bulldogs, the city of Canton, and the other teams in the UFL. To get started, I sketched out some ideas for a logo and landed on this bulldog head, which I tried to match the theme of the original Bulldogs logo from the 1920s. Then I pulled it into Illustrator to get it looking nice and clean, and wow, look how fast I'm going. I'm really good at this and definitely didn't struggle at all. This is how it turned out, so next up was coming up with the word mark. Alright, I think I finally found a good font that I can use. I think it should be pretty straightforward. Ooh, yeah, I really like that. Because it's like just modern enough for it to not seem super old. After getting all the text in place, I wanted to somehow wrap the word mark in something that resembled a football, and I finally felt good about it until I realized something was off. Wait, did I just make the UFL logo? Bro, I'm an idiot. I really just copied the UFL. Dude, I knew that this looked like something else. What if I just did it the other way? I think that looks a little bit better. Now that we have our branding, it's time to apply it to a uniform. We have our template set up. It is Nike. I think that the UFL is Under Armour, but we're just gonna ignore that for the sake of this video. I was really getting into the zone making this uniform, but I definitely had a couple moments where I could feel my brain starting to melt. That doesn't look terrible, honestly. Maybe a little bit higher, but can we get much higher? So high. After working for a while, I realized I didn't really like the direction that things were heading. We have an issue. I think that the brown looks really, really bad. So what I'm thinking of doing is switching all of this to white. I think that's pretty good. Oh shoot. Wait, there's something really cool that I wanted to do. I want to put something right here. And it's going to be epic and it's going to be swag, but I don't really know how to do it. And that's pretty much like 90% of everything that I do in Photoshop. This is going to be something really, really subtle. This memorial building seems to be like the iconic piece of architecture in the city of Canton. So I want to make like a little silhouette of that right in the middle of the back of the jersey. Yay! That was totally worth the 20 minutes it took to make that. But I think it looks good. I love adding little Easter eggs in the uniform, so I think that that's good. but for the most part, we kept it simple, kept it clean looking. I think that this is a great start for their main home uniforms. After finishing up the home uniform, I went ahead and designed the away uniform with pretty much the same layout. And I was really feeling it that day, so I came up with an alternate as well, even though the UFL doesn't do that. Not yet, at least. I also felt bad that I wasn't able to use the word mark in anything with the uniforms, so I went ahead and made a mock-up of Canton's home field to show what it would look like in the end zones.
Now, Wichita probably won't work for a semi-pro team, but a place like Omaha might. Omaha's been the home of minor league football before, as the home of the Omaha Nighthawks of the United Football League. They played in Charles Schwab Field, a baseball stadium, but averaged just under 10,000 in attendance, right in line with what we're expecting from modern UFL teams. Husker football rules the state, but Omaha is the home of the Creighton Blue Jays, who haven't had a football program in years. This might be a good expansion target, even with the small market.
Louisville, which is situated right in the heart of the UFL, might be my favorite spot for an expansion team. One of the biggest reasons for this is they're one of the largest cities in the US that don't have a major league franchise. This is a city that's starving for pro sports teams. In 2020, they opened Lynn Family Stadium to bolster their resume to land an MLS team, but it never came to fruition. That means we now have a state-of-the-art soccer stadium in Louisville that holds 15,000 fans and is only being used for a second-tier soccer team, making it a win-win situation for the UFL to become an additional tenant in a market that is sure to have a good turnout for every game. Also, just a little fun fact, Louisville actually had an NFL team way back in the 1920s called the Brecks. So I think bringing them back after a 100-year hiatus would be pretty cool. Now, growing up a Chargers fan, I might be a little bit biased, but I think San Diego is also a prime candidate for an expansion team. Seeing how St. Louis has rallied behind the Battlehawks after losing the Rams, I wouldn't be surprised to see this same effect in San Diego. We actually caught a glimpse of this in 2019 with the AAF, where the San Diego Fleet averaged 19,000 fans a game, even when they were playing in SDCCU Stadium, one of the crustiest stadiums in the entire country. Now that Snapdragon Stadium has replaced it and is a much more appropriate size for spring football, that should be all the more reason for fans to support a UFL team here. The only thing that I think might be holding them back is the fact that there aren't any other West Coast teams in the UFL currently. So unless other expansion teams on the West Coast like Seattle are added around the same time, they'd be pretty isolated from the rest of the league.
If we're considering West Coast markets, you can't just add Seattle or San Diego and be done with it. You have to add at least one more, and I believe a team in Northern California or Oregon could be a good start. I'm thinking Sacramento or Portland. Maybe bring back the Sacramento Surge or the Portland Prowlers.
Now there's one last city that I think is worth considering for an expansion team.
Raleigh, North Carolina. I really got all the way up here just for this bit.
Okay, now I know what this looks like. Dalton is just playing his favorites, but I can explain this one, I swear. Raleigh is the second fastest growing metro area in the US, which has been a huge selling point to pro sports leagues looking to expand. That's how they won the Canes back in the 90s. They were in serious talks of winning an MLS team a few years back, and most recently it's been the MLB considering the Triangle as a landing spot. So it would only make sense for the UFL to at least look into it as well. The biggest issue though would probably be finding a proper venue for this team. Carter Finley is the only major stadium in Raleigh, and it's bigger than we're looking for at almost 60,000 seats. Duke's Wallace Wade Stadium is closer to the right size, but it's still pretty big at 40,000 seats and is about 30 minutes away from Raleigh. Kenan Stadium is also on the outskirts of the Triangle and is too big, but it might as well only hold 20,000 people the way UNC fans show up on game days. Honestly, Raleigh's best option would be either expanding Wake Med Soccer Park or actually building that new stadium downtown that they've been flirting with for years now.
There's tons of other places that might make some sense too. Salt Lake City, Tempe, and Birmingham had teams in the Alliance of American Football. At the end of it though, the new UFL will only expand to 4 more teams after these next few seasons are up, if they survive that long anyway. Which locations they choose are completely up to them, but in our opinion, the best places for them to expand to sooner than later are Canton and either Omaha or Louisville, with future options in Orlando, Raleigh, New Jersey, and potentially the West Coast in that order. But what do you guys think? Is the UFL in any position to think about expansion right now? And if they are, where would you like to see teams in the future?